internalized body cells must adjust their genetics and behaviors to accommodate external outer world environments. How do our bodies respond to the environment in our outer world? I'm your host, Bruce Lipton, for this series on inner evolution. Amoebas and other single-celled organisms live independently in and directly respond to the conditions in their outer world environment. However, cells in an animal such as a human live within a separate internal environment. The human skin, the functional equivalent of the cell membrane, is the source of the nervous system that links the intercellular environment with the outer world. The nervous system reads the environmental signals, while the mind interprets these signals and sends regulatory information internally to control the genetics and behavior of our cells and organs. The mind has two interdependent elements: the conscious and the subconscious minds. The conscious mind is connected to your personal identity, your spirituality. This mind is a creative mind. The subconscious mind is a database of stored behavioral programs. This session will describe the functional differences between these two minds and how they learn in different ways. Let's start with how the fate of a cell is determined. As been described in previous episodes, my studies on stem cells and tissue culture revealed a very important fact: that the fate of these cells in the culture dish was actually dependent on the chemistry of the culture medium. Well, the significance of this is that culture medium is the equivalent of blood. Well, how does this relate to the cells in our own body? Well, first understand this very important fact. A human is not a single organism. A human body is a skin-covered culture dish with 50 trillion cells. And the original culture medium, blood, contains information. And it's the composition of this blood that actually will determine the fate of the cells. Well, there are two important components in blood that we must consider. Number one, blood provides nutrition. When I'm in the laboratory, I use the best ingredients possible to manifest culture medium for a very simple reason. If I compromise on the ingredients, the cells actually suffer. If I feed them culture medium with less than the best culture ingredients, the cells actually begin to get sick and they will die. Well, this is relevant to us as well, because since we are creating culture medium, blood, we want to make the best culture medium possible, which then means we should really just eat organic, natural foods, because industrial farm foods are filled with toxic elements that will negatively affect the cells. So a diet of wholesome food is important in creating the best culture medium for our cells. But in addition to nutrition, culture medium contains information. And this information includes hormones, growth factors, emotional chemicals. And so we should recognize that a human body is adjusting and responding to the environment at all times. So there are actually an external environment that has to be understood, as well as an internal environment within the body. Well, who reads these environments? The answer is the nervous system. The brain represents perception of the environment. And as the brain reads the environment, it can release neurochemicals, hormones, emotional chemicals into the body that will control the fate to organize it to be in harmony with whatever the conditions of the environment are. So a very important result is that the brain is interpreting the environment, and that's what controls our cells. So simply, environmental signals are what are responsible for controlling the fate of our biology. Well, when we talk about animals in general, this holds true. But as we get into higher organisms in the evolutionary tree, guess what? There's a new additional device that is interpreting the environmental signals, and that is the mind. The mind is an interpretation of what the brain perceives. And the significance of that is, well, each of us have different minds. Each of us can look at the world and respond a different way to the same environment. So in looking at the sequence of flow of information, environmental signals are picked up by the brain as perception. The mind does an interpretation of these environmental signals and then releases chemistry such as hormones, growth factors, emotional chemicals that will coordinate our body to conform to the environment that we perceive. And so it's actually belief, which is the representation of the mind's perceptions, that control our biology. Our thoughts release neurochemicals, and these agents control our biology. To give you a simple example of how this works, I'd like to use a cartoon of the brain. And in this cartoon, what you see is the brain is holding a flask of culture medium, which is actually blood, and it's feeding the cells in our skin-covered dish with this blood culture medium. If the mind is perceiving love, then the interpretation of that environment representing love causes the brain to release chemistry that actually complements that perception. So the brain releases some very important chemistry into the blood to control our biology. Included in this chemistry is dopamine, a hormone that gives us pleasure. In addition, the brain releases a hormone called oxytocin. This hormone actually causes us to bind with the source of that love. So this allows parents and children to bond together because of that love. In addition, when you're in love, the brain also releases vasopressin. This is another hormone that actually causes us to be more attractive to our partner. In turn, this keeps the love lasting a lot longer. And lastly, when you're in love, the brain releases growth hormone. And growth hormone, as the name implies, enhances our vitality. So very simply, the cocktail of chemicals released by the brain when we're experiencing love is released into the blood, the culture medium that influences our cells. The result is this: when people fall in love, they're healthier, they glow. People can even say, look at these people, you can see how they're in love by just looking at their physiology. Love enhances our growth and our vitality. However, if you open up your eyes and you see something that scares you in the environment, well, that experience of fear causes a completely different set of chemicals to be released by the brain. And as a result, changes the behavior profoundly, because the blood is now containing information other than information about love. So for example, when you're in fear, you release stress hormones such as cortisol, norepinephrine. These hormones actually change the circulation of the body and put us not into a growth phase, but actually prepare us for fight or flight, and actually to save our lives in what fear we are perceiving. In addition, fear also causes chemicals that interfere with our immune system to be released into the blood, and then this shuts down the immune system and actually leads to illness when we are living in what is called chronic fear. The consequence of this is very important because it really represents this. The function of our mind is to create coherence between our beliefs and our reality. In other words, if you believe there's something to be afraid of, then the mind's job is to create a behavior that will actually make a correlation or coherence between that belief of fear and the reality that we're experiencing. When you are experiencing love, well, then the function of the mind is to manifest the chemistry to control our behavior so that we can experience that love. Point is simple. Whatever programs we possess about our perceptions of the planet, the function of the mind is to create behavior that makes our life coherent with our beliefs. This is actually not a new idea at all. It's 2,500 years old. The Buddha actually said, what we think, we become. Well, this is actually what's going on as our thought processes adjust the chemistry of our biology, which in turn adjust our behavior, and then in result, whatever our thoughts are, we will become that in the world. I've been talking about this for many years, actually, since 1985, And conventional science has really resisted everything I've said about that. But then again, in 1990s, the new idea of epigenetics came in. And also in the current time now, science is also beginning to recognize how our consciousness is creating the character of our lives. Now, to give you a quote from Steve Cole, researcher at the University of California, Los Angeles Medical School, this is what he said in a paper, and it's profoundly important. To an extent that immunologists and psychologists rarely appreciate, we are architects of our own experience. He goes on to say, your subjective experience carries more power than your objective situation. Well, that last sentence is a little bit complex because I can change it and make it much more profoundly simple in this regard. Let's rewrite it as the following. Your belief carries more power than your reality. And this is the profound, important understanding of how our belief is actually creating our life experiences. Well, it's all influenced by the mind. And we say the mind, a lot of people think, well, that's a single thing, the mind. But this is actually incorrect because the mind is comprised of two subunits, the conscious and subconscious minds. These are two different entities. Most importantly, the conscious and subconscious minds have different functions. And very importantly, the conscious and subconscious minds learn in different ways. The function of the conscious mind, well, that's the latest evolution of the brain. It's actually a lobe of neural tissue right behind your forehead. It's called the prefrontal cortex. This is the seat of your personal identity, your source, or your spirituality. The character of the conscious mind is creativity. So I say, well then, what is the role of the conscious mind? It's to manifest our wishes, our desires, our aspirations. And the conscious mind is the seat of positive thinking, which profoundly changes our lives. A lot of people say, come on, that positive thinking can't be real. But guess what? The understanding of the placebo effect goes back nearly 100 years. What is the placebo effect? It's a positive belief about a medical drug or a medical therapy where someone thinks that the drug or therapy is going to heal them. They believe it's going to heal them. They take the magic pill, get better, and then find out that the pill was just a sugar pill. So all of a sudden you have to ask them what made them better. Well, obviously it wasn't the sugar pill. It was the belief in the sugar pill that is responsible for the placebo effect, a positive belief. This is very, very important because it really emphasizes the nature of how our thoughts are manifesting our life experiences. What most people don't understand is this. Negative thoughts are equally powerful, but work in the opposite direction. In medicine, the term for negative thoughts is the nocebo effect. Interesting point, a negative thought can cause any illness on this planet. It can even cause a person to die. So it's the power of thought that actually is controlling the character of our lives. The conscious mind, creative, wishes, desires, aspirations, that's what we're looking for. In contrast, the subconscious mind, which represents about 90% of the brain, is the equivalent of a record playback mechanism. It records behaviors, and then when we need that behavior, it's just like pushing a button, it will automatically play. Well, this is really important because the subconscious programs actually facilitate the character of our lives. Give you a simple example. When did you learn how to walk? Before you were 2 years of age. Did you ever have to relearn how to walk? Well, fortunately, no. For the simple reason is this. Once the programming of walking is installed in the subconscious mind as a program, you don't even have to say, I'm going to walk. You just have the intention of moving. The brain will automatically engage the walking program and carry it out for you automatically. So subconscious mind is really pretty cool because what it does is it saves us a lot of time from relearning things over and over again. I mean, if we didn't have a subconscious mind, every day when you wake up, guess what you'd have to first learn how to do? Walk. And of course, we never get anywhere that way. It's very efficient and very convenient. But there is one problem with that. what if some of the programs in the subconscious mind are negative? I go, well, there is a problem, because that means automatically when stimulated, these programs are not going to take us in a positive direction. They will actually undermine the character of our lives. So the subconscious is a record playback device. It's habitual, that's its main thing, as compared to creativity, which is the function of the conscious mind. So the habits of the subconscious mind, where do they come from? Well, some of the habits are genetic, because those are called instincts. If something flies toward your face, you will automatically blink your eye. It's not learned, it's a built-in instinct. And more importantly, and we're going to emphasize this, is that many of the programs in the subconscious mind we actually didn't personally experience. Many of the programs were actually acquired by observing other people and downloading their behavior. They were actually created by observing our mother, father, our family, and our community. These are acquired behaviors. So why should we have programs? Well, I'll give you a simple example. If you buy a brand new computer, it will have an operating system. I say, great, let's activate the computer. Yep, you can activate it, the operating system will kick it in, get it ready to go. Then I say, okay, let's do something with it. How about writing? Oh, how about making a drawing? I say, wait, what do you need? You need programs to carry out these functions. Interestingly, as a child is developing, it has already a built-in system to operate, but it doesn't have any programs. It has to acquire programs in order for it to be functional. So I go, oh, so we download programs and then we can use these programs to carry out our lives. Well, here's an interesting story about the downloading of programs. That during the last trimester of pregnancy and the first 7 years of life, our brain is not operating at the level of consciousness. That's a higher functional vibration. Vibration, oh, you can read that when you put wires on your head. It's called an electroencephalograph. There are all different levels of vibration. The lowest vibration is called delta. That's the vibration of the brain when it's sleeping or unconscious. The next higher level of vibration is called theta. Theta is characterized as imagination. Then the next higher vibration is actually the beginning of consciousness. That vibration is called alpha. It's actually calm consciousness. And lastly, there's still a higher vibration that we normally use during our work experiences or during our education. That higher vibration is called beta. That's like focused schoolroom consciousness. Well, we don't start out with all these vibrations. As a child, we begin with the lowest vibration when we're born, which is delta, because a child spends most of its first year sleeping, so its brain is not really functioning at that higher level. But after the first year, the child's brain starts to ramp up to the next vibration called theta. So as a child's brain's developing, it's actually got an operating system in it, but there are no programs. And the question is, when does actual programming start? Well, here's a very interesting fact. Programming starts even before the child is born. I said, well, how can a child that's still in utero be programmed? And the answer is related to something called the placenta. And the placenta is the interface between the mother's blood and the fetus's blood. Because the mother's blood is what contains the nutrition that when it crosses into the placenta will nourish the developing fetus. Well, as I mentioned, blood has more than just nutrition. In the last trimester of pregnancy, the information in the mother's blood is transferred along with the nutrition. If the mother's in love, wonderful information such as dopamine, growth hormone, this stuff is going into the fetus as well. However, if the mother's experiencing problems in her world, she's not supported, there's a lack of love, well, the fetus may not understand the reasons of what's going on. The fetus does read the information, the hormones that go in, stress hormones versus love hormones, for example. And I say, then what's relevant? The child in utero in the last trimester of pregnancy is learning from pattern. If the mother is in fear or if the mother is in stress, well, those chemicals also go into the body of the fetus and adjust the genetics via epigenetics. So the mother's experience is actually adjusting the genetics of her own fetus. through epigenetic mechanisms. So a fetus is getting what is called a Head Start program. This is a very important point in development for this reason. When a mother is born, she already has the eggs for all her generations that she can create. I go, yeah, but she won't have a baby for, let's say, 20 years. I say, relevance? Well, the whole world situation can change in 20 years. So when it's time to have a baby, the egg isn't really programmed to respond to the outside environment. This is very important because the baby's biology is going to encourage it or allow it to survive in whatever environment, a peaceful environment or a war-torn environment. Well, that happens before the baby is even born. It's already being programmed. For example, if the father is talking to the fetus as it's developing and the baby is born and the father says something, the baby will immediately identify the father who talked to it through the abdominal wall. However, once the baby is born, now it's dealing with the outside environment directly. In the first year or so of the baby's life, it's not really responding to the environment that much, mainly because most of that time, the baby is sleeping in the first year. But by the beginning of the second year, the baby is now very responsive to what's going on in the environment. But it's in a state called theta, a lower vibration than consciousness. The characteristic of theta is imagination. Well, this is exactly what children under 7 are really good at. They can have a tea party, pour nothing into a cup, drink nothing, and talk about how wonderful the tea was. Or a child could ride a broom thinking it's a horse. Well, actually, it's riding the broom in the child's mind. Imagination via theta is actually turning that broom into a real horse. The mother says, "Give me the broom." The child is like, "What are you talking about?" Because at that moment, it's no longer a broom in the imagination of that child. It is now actually a horse. So theta is the first experiences of the child responding to the external environment. After age 7, the child ramps up its brain activity to the next higher level called alpha. And alpha is calm consciousness. So now the child becomes conscious of the world around it. And by age 12, the brain activity ramps up again to the next higher level called beta, which is schoolroom focused consciousness. This is why there are different educational paradigms after age 12, because a child is more capable of dealing with higher consciousness. Well, we can look at this chart of the evolution of the states of the brain from delta, theta, alpha, and beta, and what we recognize a very important fact. The first 7 years of a child's life, it's not expressing consciousness. Theta is below consciousness. And I say, well, there's another very important characteristic of theta, and that is theta is a state of hypnosis. And I say, what's the relevance? How many rules do you think a child must learn to become a functional member of a family and a community? Thousands of rules of behavior. I mean, just to give you an idea, think about it this way. When a father talks to his own child, he talks in one way. When a father talks to a neighbor's child, he talks in a different way. And how he talks to the mother is totally different than how he speaks with a neighbor, which is then totally different than the father would talk with a policeman. And all of a sudden you start to see that each situation in the world requires somewhat of a different behavior. How is a child supposed to learn thousands of different codes of behavior? And the answer is profoundly simple, because nature has created the first 7 years of that child to be in a state of theta hypnosis. All the child has to do is observe the mother, the father, the family, the community. And what's the child doing during theta? Downloading hypnotically the behaviors. And the significance about this then is the primal programs that go into a child's nervous system are not coming from the wishes and desires of the child. They're actually directly downloaded from observing the family and the community. Very significant, because those behaviors may not necessarily support the wishes and desires of that child when it grows up. There's another factor in this time period that's very critical, and that is the experience of what is called self-identity. A child may ask, who am I? The answer actually is not coming from the child. It's coming from the parents and the community and the teachers who actually tell the child, oh, you're the smartest, most loving, beautiful child that's ever been on this planet. Of course, that will be downloaded and become part of self-identity. However, that's a very rare input. Most children are criticized by their parents. You say, criticized for what? Well, think about it this way. If there's a player on a team and that player isn't performing well, the coach doesn't come up and go, oh, it would be so nice of you to do better. No, the coach comes up and says, come on, you can do better than that. That's not good enough. Who do you think you are? You don't deserve to be on this team. Well, the coach is saying that to do what? To actually needle the player into going, okay, coach, I'll do better, because an older child with consciousness can understand exactly why the coach is saying that. But then I go, well, what if parents act as coaches? And I go, well, here's the problem. If the child is under 7, the child's not conscious. It's not understanding the meaning of everything. It's in a state of record. It's in a state of theta. It's just downloading the words. So parents are trying to act like a coach to improve the character or the behavior of their children. A child is taking all those words exactly as they were spoken and downloading them into the subconscious mind. Our subconscious minds are loaded with critical assessments of ourselves, so much so that we actually have a very difficult time in loving ourselves. I say, why? Because our subconscious programs can tell you every reason why you should criticize yourself. Not good enough, not smart enough, not loving enough, blah, 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 over and over again. And I go, oh my God, our subconscious programs are so self-critical that in our mind, we will use those and criticize ourselves. This is very disempowering, because then all of a sudden, we are not really loving ourselves anymore. We're super critical of ourselves. And this unfortunately leads to some very bad behavioral consequences. So, first 7 years of a child's life, download programs. No consciousness involved, but necessary for enculturation and self-identity. But then, after age 7, consciousness kicks in. Alpha consciousness, creative consciousness. This is actually a really wonderful part of our lives, where we start to behave and become very creative with our consciousness, and then even evolve into the higher level from theta to beta, and have much more complex understandings of who we are and how we fit into the world around us. Well, now there's a problem, and this problem is so profound. It affects all of us, and the problem is simply this. Conscious mind can drive our body, consider our body a vehicle, and the conscious mind's got its hands on the wheel. So when the conscious mind is driving the vehicle, we're moving toward the destinations that we want in our life. Conscious mind can also think. I go, so? I say, thinking is an internal job. In other words, wherever a thought is, it's on the inside, it's not on the outside. If I ask you a simple question right now, tell me what you're doing on Sunday. I say, where are you going to get the answer for that question? You're going to go inside. I say, wait a minute. If the conscious mind is going inside to seek an answer, then by definition, it is no longer driving the vehicle, because it's not paying attention. I go, oh my gosh, then every time we're in thought, the conscious mind lets go of the wheel, and the conscious mind goes inside. Well, science has revealed that the average person is in thought 95% of the day. If our conscious mind is in thought 95% of the day and not paying attention, then what's controlling our biology? That becomes the job of the subconscious mind, because the subconscious mind is autopilot. And what's the problem? The subconscious mind is not going to drive you toward wishes and desires. The subconscious mind's got programs in it that you downloaded from other people. A very interesting fact, science has recognized up to 70% of the downloaded programs in our subconscious mind, guess what, are negative and disempowering programs. What's the point? We're only operating our life 5% of the time seeking wishes and desires. 95% of our life is actually coming from the programs in the subconscious, because we're in thought. And most of those programs are negative and disempowering. I say, then what's the consequence? You are not leading the life you wish and desire. You're leading the life of a program that you got in the first 7 years. And then recognizing that most of these are negative and disempowering, then we start to see that our life becomes a struggle. And yet we don't actually see that we're involved. All we see is the result of our subconscious mind taking control because our life is not working out the way we want. Reason? Because the programs from the subconscious aren't yours. They came from other people with their own problems. And all of a sudden, we have a very important insight here. And the insight is this: are you creating the life that you want, or are you creating the life you've been programmed with? In fact, the idea of this programming is not new. For 400 years, the Jesuits have had a very famous saying, "Give me a child for the first 7 years and I'll give you the man." St. Francis Xavier. The Jesuits already knew whatever program went in the first 7 years, when you're in a state of theta, 95% of your life is going to come from that program. So if you can control the first 7 years of a child's life, you ultimately control the rest of that child's life, because 95% of that life is going to come from the programs downloaded during that period. This is profoundly important for this reason. We wake up in the morning, we have wishes and desires. Oh, today I'm going to be healthy. Today I'm going to find a relationship. Oh, today I'm going to get that job I always wanted. And then we go out into the world. And then we struggle, and then we come home at night beaten. So they look at themselves as victims. I'm a victim of the world. Why? I wanted this, I got that. And so it's not me that caused the problem. I'm the one with the good wishes. Well, there's a story that I've relayed to audiences for 30 years. Perhaps in your history you had a friend and you were very close to your friend and you knew your friend's behavior very well. And you also knew your friend's parent. And one day you see your friend expressing the same behavior as their parent. So, it excites you. You want to tell your friend, you go, "Hey, Bill, you're just like your dad." Back away from Bill. Bill's going to go ballistic. "How can you compare me to my dad? I'm nothing like my dad." Most people laugh when they hear this because they've had that experience. And I'm going to tell you, this is one of the most profound, important stories I can tell you. For what reason? Everybody else can see that Bill behaves like his dad. The only one who doesn't see it is Bill. I say, but why can't Bill see it? And the answer is this: where's his observing conscious mind during this time? It's inside thinking. So Bill does not even see the behavior that is coming out. And the problem is, hey, if 70% of those programs are disempowering and self-sabotaging, and you can't see the behavior, what is the consequence? And the relevance is really, really critical, because all of us are Bill. It's just the natural way of life. So what does this information mean for us as adults? Well, with the new insights on childhood developmental programming, we are then enabled to move from our perception of being victims to that of becoming masters in programming the character of our lives. And by reprogramming the subconscious mind, we can manifest a heaven on earth experience. Thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Bruce Lipton, for this series on inner evolution through biological change. Join me for the next episode, where we talk about heaven on earth and taking the proverbial red pill.